Good evening, everyone, and very, very warm welcome to the History Center for this very, very exciting program that is being brought to you by the libraries of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. Renee Grassi is my dear colleague, the fearless leader of the Lake Bluff Public Library, and I'm Ishwar Lakshmi Narayan. These two libraries have been collaborating on this two community, one nonfiction book read, if you will. And, they've tended to pick themes that are, current, that are topical, that are extremely important in this day and age. And of course, in this day and age, mental health is, of course, one of the really, really big things since the pandemic. One of the topics that has really resonated with a lot of folks. And so the theme and topic of this book discussion or this book talk that we're going to have today really focuses on mental health. And we're very, very honored to have Christie Tate with us today, who's written this memoir on, which is really titled Group, How One Therapist, a Circle of Strangers, and some very colorful language saved my life. And both these libraries have actually been doing programming for about a year now. This has taken almost a year for us to get here. Planning really started about a year ago. The staff at both these institutions got together, and we've been planning, and we've been hosting numerous programs this past month, ranging from art therapy to therapy dogs to music therapy, you name it. And book discussions, of course, several book discussions on group. So it's really wonderful that we now have Ms. Tate with us today to have this conversation and answer your questions. Copies of the book are available at the Lake Forest Bookstore for purchase and at both libraries for checkout. Renee, you want to say something?
Thank you, Ishwar. Hello and good evening to everybody. Renee Grassi from Lake Bluff Library. You can also download this book as well as check out the audiobook for those of you that enjoy having books read to you in the car or at home. Again, colorful language, so be prepared. But also, what I would say is just really the audio experience is just a really strong voice. So for those of you that like audiobooks like me, I highly recommend it. And I'm going to pass it back to Ishwar. I'll have some comments after the program tonight, but thank you all for joining us.
And I really especially want to recognize the History Center, of course, for hosting us tonight. Thank you, History Center. And also the staff at both our libraries who worked extremely hard for the past 1 year. And I want to special shout out to Lydia Frank at Lake Forest and Jillian Chapman, who couldn't be with us today, but again, and a host of many other staff members. Will you please stand wherever you are and be recognized for all the hard work? It does take a lot of planning and hard work to, get something like this organized. A special welcome to Dr. Stephen Miller from Rosalind University, who has a background in social and quantitative psychology. Can you explain what quantitative psychology is?
Lots of statistics.
Okay, lots of statistics. Thank you. Got his PhD from Loyola, and also master's degrees from Illinois State and Loyola. So we're really, really thrilled to have you facilitate this discussion. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Dr. Miller, and welcome again, Ms. Tate.
Great. Before I start asking you questions, I'd like to thank you for writing a book about mental health and helping remove some of the stigma. First of all, the title of the book, right? You say that it's how a circle of strangers saved your life. And I'm curious as to what you envision things would have been like if you didn't encounter the group. Your book starts out talking about your wish for death, your very first wish for death, and so I'm curious how you think things may have proceeded.
Yeah, I actually have thought about this a lot, because I actually get this question a lot. What would have happened had you not gone to therapy, found Dr. Rosen in the groups? And I think I probably could have limped along going to 12-step recovery meetings. They brought me really, really far from the edge. I don't believe that I could have had intimate relationships. So I'm not sure how I would have tolerated having a life that I knew was half a life, because I could see that I was missing something and I didn't know how to get it. And in my experience, going to more meetings and working harder and doing more of a fourth step, if you know anything about the 12 steps, taking inventories, I was working harder and harder and harder, and people were getting farther and farther away from me. So I think I could have had a great career and a very, very gray internal life.
Sure. And am I correct that you still see Dr. Rosen today?
Yes, I do. Saw him yesterday.
Okay.
Yep, work in progress. Work in progress.
I feel like one of the big themes that comes out is the sort of no secrets approach to the group and whatnot. And it seems like through the course of your memoir, you've learned very much to be able to express yourself and talk about your needs and whatnot. I'm wondering what you continue to get from your experiences with Dr. Rosen.
People are very anxious about the notion of staying in therapy forever and ever and ever. And I understand that, because Dr. Rosen profits from my patienthood, right? But so what am I getting out of it? And for me, the having a place to go, I'm still me. I'm able to have a marriage, I have children, I have a career now in writing. I've now left law and I write full time, and I do therapy part-time. And I still need support. I need, now the problems that I have aren't, I'm sitting in a grocery store, like maybe I should kill myself because I'm so lonely. That's not what animates me, that's not what triggers me. Now it's, I have aging parents who are ill, I'm estranged from my sister, maybe because of what I write about. I have an aging body myself. How am I going to support my 2 teenage kids? I have learned that having a place to go with all of that, I still have the same intense emotions, and having a place to put them and channel them and work with other people. And now in the group, I love the people who are there. I mean, I hope that comes through in the pages. And now I'm also like, I'm an elder. When I came in, I was a baby. I was in my 20s. Now I'm 50. There's a woman who just came into my group, and she's very, very, like, I thought she was 19. She says she's 30. Okay. She's very, very young. And I'm having a very different experience. Like, it's the first person I've been in group with who's young enough to be my child. And she's so much like me. And she got to Dr. Rosen because she was in an inpatient treatment for an eating disorder, and she read my book. And she figured out who Dr. Rosen was. Now, I think I disguised this pretty well. She's like, I found it in 2 seconds. So, okay. So now she called him and was like, I have read this book. I need your help. Same sort of profile I have. Eating disordered, high functioning, family dysfunction, repression, wants a boyfriend. And so I'm like, come sit next to me. Like, let's do this. And I am having this incredible experience of loving her and going back and loving the Christie who came in 1997, or it wasn't that, it was 2001 when I first saw Dr. Rosen. And to be there to be of service. And I mean, I'm doing my own work, of course. Like, I've got work to do, and there's people who are ahead of me. Like, there's a woman in my group who's 70, and she's already launched her children, and she's already buried her parents. And I'm looking to her, like, how to age gracefully and how to do all these things. Meanwhile, I can look back to the people coming up who are younger than I am and extend them my hand and the hope. That feels like an incredibly enriching process. And I always say, it's a privilege to be able to go to therapy. Like, I spend 90 minutes, 2 days a week, in group, because I like it. That hardly seems like enough. It enriches me. I like the scaffolding. I think of it like, I want to continue to I don't want to have to get another crisis to get more help. Like, why not just keep the scaffolding, keep it going? It's working. And the people who I'm in group with, I'm still in there with Max, Brad, the guy from the epilogue. He's in the if you've read the book, I don't want to presume, but the guy from the epilogue, he's getting ready to have a baby with his wife. I mean, to be held that closely, and I came from my family growing up didn't have the ability or desire or tools to hold me closely, and I want to be held closely, and I want to hold others closely, and I need lots of practice because I'm still undoing, our formative years are deep. It's very deep, and group helps me practice intimacy, showing up, doing the emotional work, so I don't have to spew it on people out on the street, and my children, and my husband. So they are like, my husband's always like, when are you going back to group? when Dr. Rosen goes on vacation, my house is like, oh, watch it.
To follow up, I'm wondering about the things that you've practiced in groups that are particularly easy to implement in your family life, and those that are also particularly difficult. And if you could talk about the
what I think is the most dazzling nugget that I got from group that I just didn't know till I got there was that secrets will make you sick. And I like to hand that to my children, obviously by explaining, like, you don't have to tell, that doesn't mean tell everyone everything, but if you've got a festering thing, tell someone. And it doesn't have to be me. Yesterday, my daughter said to me, she's 14, she's a freshman, and she said to me, when I talk to you about my friendships, I don't like what you say to me. And I was like, that's fair. And she said, so I don't talk to you, I talk to my therapist. And it was, I sort of wanted to be like, well, you should probably give me another chance, and we should talk about, don't write me off. And I was like, that's great, as long as you have someone to tell. So this notion of like, tell someone, your friends. I mean, I try to push trusted adults on my children. And then, so that's one. What's harder for me as a parent is, Dr. Rosen has modeled all these years. Now I came in 2001. It's been 23 years. He's modeled when I explode. I exploded yesterday. This is fresh. And he just smiles and he rubs his heart and he's so proud of me and good for you and your feelings are so beautiful. And then when I have a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old, okay? And they got lots of emotions about algebra and the dance and baseball and the summer job they didn't get. And they've got big, big emotions. Sometimes I just want to be like, can we do this later? Can we, I, in theory, and telling all of you, I support big emotions. I don't want them to stuff it. What I know about stuffing emotions is I can look back and see a direct connection between stuffing my emotions, bulimia, and having no close relationships. The last thing I want my kids to do is stuff their emotions. But it's time-consuming, and it disrupts dinner, and it's uncomfortable, and it's triggering. And I'm trying to be a solid person. Like, I see Dr. Rosen sits in his chair, and he looks right at me, and he's like, just giving me space. And I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to do. That is easier said than done. So that part, I have a lot of room to grow, and just letting them have their feelings, not rush in to fix it and make it tidy and go away. And that impulse is deep in me.
So you say that you've learned things by sort of watching him, and I know that one of the themes throughout your memoirs is sort of the assignments that he gives. Have you or the other group members started modeling giving assignments to other people in your lives? And
that's a good question.
How's that
work
work
out? Could you imagine? Every now and then, now I'm sort of transitioned to this role as a writer, but I also work with other writers who are coming up and want to publish memoir. And sometimes I think to myself, I want to give them a prescription so bad. And I'm not in a position of authority. I mean, maybe I'm their teacher or they pay me to help them. And what the difference is, I just say, I'm having an idea. Are you interested? This may have nothing to do with writing. To one woman, I was like, you need to, that's always a problem. What if you went to a museum? What if you stepped away for a minute? What if you, went to the park and took a walk instead of like beat yourself over the head with this manuscript? Or what if you read a book? I just want to tell people, go to the library, read a book, right? Like, it's different because I authorize Dr. Rosen, I pay him, I came saying I need help. And so when he offers me a prescription, there's the tacit understanding. And so out in the real world, like the other day I tried to play therapist to my husband. Do not recommend, 0 stars. I don't think we are supposed to, like he was mad at something that my daughter was doing. And I was like, you seem really worked up. What's this about you? And he was like, what? And I was like trying to get him to look inward, like he was really, really upset about something. And I was like, this really isn't about her. And he was like, yes, it is. And I kept pushing and pushing. And I was like, I was trying to be his therapist. And he didn't like it. And if he tried to do that to me, I wouldn't like it either. So it's very humbling for me to, it's one thing to like absorb the lessons of group. It's another to like run around playing like I'm Dr. Rosen.
I was thinking about with the other group members that you seem to have friendships with, it seems like they might expect some of that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what has been the most successful and enriching in my life is when I am with a group mates and we come up together with an idea, like we kind of come up with a prescription for us together. The example I'm thinking of is there's a woman in my group who is like, I think she is the smartest and most competent person I know. She's a doctor and she runs a company. She does all the things. She's like a multi-hyphenate, you know, and she's also like an extremely competent person. And she called me one day and she said, I need your help. And I was like, oh my God, really? Like, I was so excited. I was like, don't blow it, don't blow it. And she's like, she had to do some kind of like a continuing medical education, like answer these questions. She's like, I can't do it. It's boring. I don't want to do it. I want to do my bigger, sexier work. And I was like, okay, well, how can I help? I'm like, I can't, where are we going? You know? And she said, will you come over and do a hard thing that you have to do while I do this hard thing I have to do? I was like, everything I do is hard. Like, I mean, should I work on my novel, my next memoir, my short story, my essay? So what we've been doing is on Friday mornings, we get together for 2 hours, and we don't talk. We do pleasantries, we get some tea, and then we set a timer. And the tomato timer, anybody know the Pomodoro method? You set a timer for 25 minutes, and you do your work, and then you get a 5-minute break. I'm like, how's it going? Checking in. If you ever see a novel from Christie Tate, it will be because of these study halls. And I guess if she continues to practice as a licensed physician, it will be because of but we co-created that because we're both swimming in the water of Dr. Rosen, and we know that mutual aid will help us, and doing it together. And I also think there's something magical about there's something in it for both of us. Like me trying to help her or she trying to help me isn't as vulnerable and it isn't as magical. But we both come together and accomplish what we need to accomplish. It's magical. And last week she was out of town, so I was like, I'm gonna still do it, you know? And it felt different, it looked different, there were less words on the page when I was done. So there is something to that I can't explain to you the neuropath, I bet you can. But I know that it works, and I know that it creates a sort of a gentle productivity that I can't replicate by myself.
Gotcha. So you mentioned your sister. When I was writing my questions, I was thinking about what your relationship with your family is like, and this also ties to another question. Are there parts of your memoir that you wish you didn't share? Yes.
It has nothing to do with I had already made peace with my family, and I told them, when I first started writing the book, I didn't think it was going to be a real book. I thought that I was going to learn how to write, and then I would practice. This was going to be like drills, and then I would go write a novel. But then I started writing this, and I was like sharing it with people, and they're like, no, this is a real book. And I had just great denial, which is a great tool if you're trying to write a book and you're scared. Memoirists, almost all the memoirists I know are scared about who they're going to hurt, who they're going to have to talk to. And I would have never written such an explicit book if I thought it was going to go out to the world. Certainly not. And so when I got my book deal, I through therapy sessions and talking to my husband, like I called my parents, and my parents were awesome. And they are not of my generation. They are not of therapy generation. They are not of tell the world your story generation. And I said, well, there's going to be stuff about y'all in there. And they said, write what you need to write, which is the most loving thing ever, 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 ever. And I mean, my mom had no idea what I was really going to write, but the sentiment was there. And so when I sent it to them, and when I called them, and my mom is very Catholic, and she was like, Christie, this book, and she was just like flustered. And I was so proud of us. I sent it to them well in advance. I said, if there's anything that you object to, I will take it out. And my dad just kept saying, I was waiting for your husband to show up. I was sure happy when I saw him on the page. And it was awkward, and it was intimate. My conversation with both of my parents, it was awkward and intimate. And I'm so glad we have that. And right after we'd had this conversation, I was listening to some stand-up comic, a young woman, I can't remember who it was, and she works Pretty Blue, and she's like, oh, this isn't for my parents. I don't invite them. It's not for them. And I had the thought, well, I could have just said, this book isn't for you. But I would have missed that. I would have missed that awkwardness. My mom said, the thing I was the most afraid of my mom saying was, I'm sorry. I thought I didn't do a good job. Like, I didn't want her to think that. I don't think that. And she said that. She said, I felt so sad. And she said, I felt so sorrowful. She goes, oh, wait, that's too many syllables. I felt sorrow, great sorrow. And that was just like, it's so, like, that's the thing, right? Letting other people have feelings, even about what I've done and am doing, that involves both of us, and just breathe and absorb it and let her feel sorrow. And I got to say to her, Mom, you did so many things to set me up for success, professionally and to get to Dr. Rosen. I don't know if I'd get to Dr. Rosen if my dad wasn't in recovery and my parents hadn't given me all the advantages I had and I got to say to her, it wasn't your fault that I went to Hawaii, and one of the things that is pieces of my story is I experienced a tragedy in Hawaii, and that's not at her feet. None of this lands at her feet. And she kept saying, well, we knew there was something wrong with you, but we didn't know how to help you. And that's also super loving, and I got to say, it wasn't your job. It's not your job. It had to be from the outside. It had to happen when it happened. And it happened, I got into recovery when I was 19. I got to Dr. Rosen by the time I was 26 and a half. That's incredible. People wait years and years and years or never do this work. So I feel grateful we had that conversation. As far as if there was anything I wish that wasn't in there, yes. I don't know if there's any lawyers in the room, but when I was writing this book, I was like, I'm going to put my real law firm because, and this is totally ego, I wanted to put the name of my actual law firm because it was hard to get into. And I thought, I wanted to signal to people, I'm smart. I'm smart, and things were crazy inside, and I had all these dysfunctions, but I was smart enough to get one of the hardest legal jobs in Chicago. And the minute it came out, I was like, why? Why? That was it was totally ego-driven. And I did it to signal to other lawyers, like, I wasn't in some rinky-dink thing you haven't heard of. You've definitely heard of this law firm. And then it's my biggest regret in my book because it was completely ego-driven. So I wish I would have everything else had a pseudonym. My husband has a pseudonym, obviously Dr. Rosen. There's no real names in there except me and that law firm. So I'll do better next time.
So at the beginning of your book, so much of it is wrapped up in law school and getting the job at Skadden and whatnot. And now you've left this profession. Your identity has changed a lot. Can you tell me about the process of change and Was that difficult? It seems like it might be in
Yes.
sort of,
Yes.
yeah.
I picked law when I was super, super lonely. I'd just gone through a breakup, and I was like, I need something to, it's like I need a sponge. I need something to absorb all of this energy and this grief, and I need a career that will give me some kind of credential, like some kind of cachet in the world, because I was sure I was going to die alone. And I have told people this before, and they're like, you were 25 and you went through a breakup and you were sure you were going to die alone? I was like, yes, that's called mental illness. That's what I had. And I went to law school. I picked law in a way that as a consolation prize for all the things I knew I would never have those other things. So I'm just going to be a baller. I'll have great shoes, I'll have great purses, because I'll make a ton of money, and I'll be so busy, and I'll just like dive into, it was like a fantasy of addiction, like of work addiction and status and gravitas, and then I thought, well, no one will notice that I have no personal life. I have maybe a cat, but I don't have a husband. And so picking that profession, needless to say, it wasn't my heart's desire. I think that I actually had great experiences in the law firms, but like something, I wanted to be creative, but I was too scared. I didn't know any creative people. I didn't know anybody who did it full time. I didn't know it was like a job. And to be perfectly honest, if Reese Witherspoon hadn't put her sticker on my book, I'd probably still be. My last job was it was a government, I won't say it as an amends to oversharing. I was at a government organization. It was fine. It was great. It was fine. It was fine. It wasn't great. But I could do my work. I worked from home 3 days a week. Everyone was really smart. They were all refugees from big law firms. And I was a great high producer. I could have done that for another 20 years, absolutely. But there was just something about, well, when Reese Witherspoon puts her sticker on your book goes places that it doesn't go without it. And I just thought, well, here's a chance. Actually, my therapy group was like, bet on yourself. And there's a woman who's in my therapy group who was like, don't ever write about me or I will kill you. She's not in the book, okay? She would. And I honored that boundary, and I knew she has a very sensitive job. She's a private person, was like, no, absolutely not. So she's not in there, but I know where she belongs in all those pages. And it was probably a couple months after Group came out, and it was still the pandemic, and I was like, it was like a tsunami hit me, because we thought this book wasn't really going to do much. We thought it was going to be quiet, maybe end up at Costco. And this woman looked at me, and she said, I think you're holding on to that job so that you can't feel the full joy of all your potential, and that you're holding on to it to weigh yourself down. And it was like, you know, sometimes some people say things to you and you're just like, you hear it in your bones and you're like, okay. So then I thought, well, I might as well bet on myself. And if it doesn't work, I can figure something out. And it's been 3.5 years. And what I will say now that writing, before law was my job and writing was like my mistress, like my secret, my joy. You know, I got up early, I stole moments to write, and now writing is the job. And so I have a different relationship to it. It feels more, there's a weight to it that before, when I was in obscurity and it was a stolen time, now I have expectations of myself working through all of that. It's still worth it. One of the things there's this awesome Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love. She's got this awesome conversation that's on YouTube, and she talks about being a creative, and like there's so much uncertainty and financial stress, and there's no career path, and no one's waiting for a book from Christie Tate. You just have to make your work and send it out into the world and let what happens happens. And she's like, she uses the word shit sandwich. She's like, that's the shit sandwich that is part of being an artist, and I'm willing to eat it. And so that's a very vivid metaphor, but I just think I've chosen this. I can go back to billable hours and arguing for judges and, you know, looking for citations and using the blue book. I can go back to that, but now I think I can't. It's like when you take something out, you can't stuff it back. I think I can't stuff myself back in that now. So the parts that are hard are worth it, because overall, the overall project is, I just feel like I'm called to work through whatever parts I don't like about being a writer. That's just more work to do.
So how do you feel like your relationship with writing is different now? You've written another novel, BFF, and do you feel more confident, or is it more of a job to do that it doesn't give you as much joy? Or yeah.
I think it's really a door number 3 situation. It doesn't feel like when I would have to file, my last job, I had to file 6 briefs a month, and it was just like, So that was like, the law was like a numbers game. It was all in my head, and writing is like head and heart and body. I didn't know that being a writer was going to have anything to do with my body. It seems like it's a head thing, but there's something about Lydia Yuknovich. She's one of the teachers who helped me so much. She's got tons of great work. Her memoir is called Chronology of Water. And if you think my book is spicy, my book is Bambi compared to Chronology of, for real. You've been warned. But it's so beautiful, and she's a wonderful teacher, and she's so expansive and so loving. And when I would hear her talk about, writing, she was like, stories are in your body. The stories are in your body. And I'm like, I kind of like to live from my head up, body, whoa, what's going on down there? So that part, it's so gratifying, it's so all-encompassing, the experience of making things, making words on the page and sending them out into the world. It's not a job, but it's not a job. And also, I just feel like it's only fair to tell audiences, I don't know if this is possible if I don't have a partner who has a very steady income, and I was carrying the insurance at my government job, and now he is. I just feel like that's so unfair, just to be like, I just write, and whatever happens, happens. I have a partner who has a big job, and that's part of the privilege that I walk through the world with. But what I can get bogged down with in writing, and even if you're not writers, this kind of insider baseball, publishing is broken, and I'm like, publishing, have you seen law? I came from law. What? There's everything's broken. Hello, everything's broken. The spiritual note that I want to hit is, where is it working? Where's the joy? Where's the connection? I still get letters from readers who've read group who are like, I didn't know group therapy existed. I can't afford regular therapy, so they're so grateful to have found it. And I think to myself, I got a note from someone from Lithuania, and I translated. I think she was saying, thank you, this helped me. That's incredible. What a privilege that is. So writing is so much bigger, and it's inside me and it's outside me, and I really just want to be available to plug into it. I think of it like a source. I want to plug into it, and I can get bogged down by I don't know if maybe I peaked. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see. Thanks.
So many of Dr. Rosen's methods are non-traditional, unorthodox,
Yeah.
and I wonder, what are your thoughts about sharing the idea that group psychotherapy is like that? Because I imagine that the experiences of many people who go to groups are not going to be at all like your experiences with Dr.
Yeah. I don't think I fully understood. It's kind of like a family. Your family does what you do, and you eat spaghetti every Sunday, so you think everybody does. And then you find out people eat all kinds of things on Sunday. So I certainly knew that Dr. Rosen was wacky, because it was not a secret or subtle. But I also, once the book came out and I would go speak to therapy classes, or I spoke at the Canadian Group Psychotherapy Association. There was hundreds of Canadian psychotherapists, and they were all just like, this is so weird, this is so unusual. And so it slowly dawned on me. And I tell people, I mean, he's one doctor. He's one I mean, you don't have to see Dr. Rosen to get well. You don't have to see Dr. Rosen to go to group. Mostly I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I thought I realized it would be entertaining, and then it just took on a life of its own, right? But when I think of it now, it's like, if I just put a tool in somebody's tool belt, like, maybe none of y'all will go to group, but maybe there's a teenager in your life who seems to be pretty lost and has an eating disorder and wants a boyfriend, and you can pass that along. Like, we can all pass it along. It's like not for everybody. I hope it doesn't feel like I'm proselytizing, because I don't think it's for everybody. It's just what happened to me, and if it's helpful to someone else, not even if they go see Dr. Rosen, but if they find their own way, or even if, like, I had somebody write me and say, I didn't know that thing about secrets, and there's a woman I walk with at my church, and I've started telling her more things, and I feel better. I'm like, that's amazing. It does not have to be Dr. Rosen, of course. And I think I got my first clue that this was obviously going to turn people off. Some people are going to be very turned off by all of this, and that also is understandable. And I remember talking to my editor, and she said something about her therapist, and she's like, oh, I would never do group. Oh my God. And I was like, what? And I was like, you picked this book. Like, you backed this horse, And she's like, oh, I would never. And so I was like, okay. I mean, it's certainly not for everyone. And I know, this is the other thing I've learned. And I think I knew this intuitively. Like, readers are so smart. They're so smart, right? So they can go find their own group, and they don't have to, and a lot of readers found Dr. Rosen. So the readers just deserve to know the story, and then they can metabolize it for themselves and decide if they want any part of that in their life.
I remember very well this story about, in your book, about the 90-minute session where no one spoke.
Yeah.
So that to me seems like something about not any individual person, but the group as a whole. Have you had experiences like that in the group again as you've gone through for the number of years you've...
That was so strange. And even when I think about it now, I feel that sort of tremor of holiness. And therapy groups, and when I go talk to therapists, they always ask about that, which I think is really funny. And I cannot talk. You can probably guess, I don't do a lot of silence. I don't like it. It's not where I'm comfortable. And whenever I teach, when I do a writing class or a workshop, my evaluations always say, you should wait a little longer when you're, like, I ask for a volunteer, and then I let 2 beats of silence go by, and then I'm like, okay, moving on. And they're like, please give us more of a chance. Like, essentially they're saying tolerate silence. So when we went into this session this one day, and no one said a word for the entire 90 minutes. If you would have told me that I was going to do that, I would not have believed it. It's so weird. Are we looking at each other? Are we not looking at each other? What are we doing with our hands? Like, I can't believe we're all talkers. Like, I mean, we all, like, half the time I go in there with an agenda, like, well, this, and this, and so do the 8 other people there, right? It was the strangest, the only word I can think of that fits is holy. It was just holy. It was like, we just helped, like, people talk about holding the space. That's what we were doing, and I still draw on that experience. It's like, I think doing the work is like working hard, you're sweating, you're talking, you're not burying the lead, and you're telling all the details, and you're letting your shame out, and that's all great, and that got me well, but, like, what about being quiet? That's just, it was just incredible, and I think about it a lot, and I get asked about it a lot, and it's never been replicated. It's never been replicated. I hope someday it is, because it'd be interesting to revisit the Christie I am today, and that 90 minutes of silence. It was almost like a bath, like a bath of silence. Like, there's so much movement and dynamism and stimulation in a group situation, right? Like, we all have our roles, we're hyper many of us are hyperverbal, and we know where all the bodies are buried and how to trigger each other, and to just be quiet. There's nothing like that. So try that. Try that in your groups. See what happens.
Have you spoken to your other group members about that experience?
Yes, and it's very frustrating. 2 people are like, I don't remember that. I'm like, that's it. I'm like, this formative 90 minutes of my life that is a part of my book that I talk to strangers about, you don't remember. And then somebody else is like, I seem to be holding the idea that that was a very important, holy thing. I mean, I listened to my language. It's sanctified. It was a baptism, And they're like, that was weird. I'm like, okay. I mean, okay. Which is very interesting because there's a lot of things that were in my book. And some of the work of the group was to metabolize my book about our work that went out into the world, and that was many sessions to talk about that and work through that, what it meant to the group, what it meant to individuals who are in it or not in it, and they remember things really differently. Like, I had a pretty conflictual relationship with Max, and I threw a shoe at him, and he yelled at me, and it was, again, that was so important to me. It was the first time ever I just stood up and screamed in a man's face. We were this close. His buttons were touching my coat or whatever. And I didn't know, it was scary, and we survived it. And he was barely remembers. And I'm just isn't that how family is? You're remember we went to the state fair and I threw up on the Ferris wheel, and no one in your family remembers. It's sort of and it's okay. What I hold dearly is, it matters to me. They're not gaslighting me, that didn't happen, but it's it's okay that it matters to me. It meant something to me. I made meaning out of it. And there's things that they remember that I don't, that flew past me, and it's okay. I think it helped me learn to stand on my own 2 feet, value what I value, love what I love, remember what I remember. I don't need them all to feel the same way about. I think I used to feel we all have to have the same script, the same emotional affect, and it's just not like that. It's just not like that, and it's okay. It doesn't mean my experience doesn't matter. It means mine matters all the more to me because it's mine.
Are there other events that happened in the group that were meaningful for other people that you know that weren't meaningful for you?
Yeah, earlier drafts of the book, I really told y'all all kinds of things about other people's lives, why they came into group, their very interesting sexual situations, which were more interesting than mine, and their divorces, their lawsuits. And I realized somewhere along the way, once it was going to be a book, I was like, that doesn't belong, that's not my story to tell. And I did an ethical review where I took out anything that wasn't just what they gave me during group. Anything else was, they're all disguised, but I didn't tell the little nuggets that I knew would be so juicy and enhance my book, but also destroy my ethics. So I took that stuff out. And there were a lot of conflicts, there were some deep-held rivalries between 2 members, and they would fight, and sometimes it would get physical. And I remember the first time that happened, and I wrote about it. And then I was just I can't write about someone else's fights. I have plenty of my own, and that's what I should be focusing on. And I don't know what it felt like to be in there. I know what it felt like to be a witness, and I decided if I wanted to write about that, but then it wasn't that exciting. So other people's conflicts, I felt belonged to them, and it was my book. I should concentrate on the ones where I was the protagonist of the fight.
How did you react to the situation when there was a physical fight in the group?
The first time, there's in the group room, so it's a very spare room for obvious reasons. I mean, it gets more spare every year when people like me try to grab things and hit themselves over the head. But there's chairs and tissues, and that's it. But there used to be this cloth cube, and it's yay high, and it's for when people would do rage work, you would get this thing called a bataka, and you just hit it and scream. And I only did it like twice, so it wasn't I guess I didn't need it. I was doing it just fine without the cube. So the first time, this guy and this woman got into this fight about, it was about insurance. I actually remember it very clearly. And then I got scared and I went and hid behind the cube. Like, I regressed. I mean, at the time, I was 32, and I just got really scared. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen, so I went and hid behind the cube. And then the second time, I just scooted my chair just way back. Like, I don't have the expectation that I need to be, like, up close to violent situations. Like, Dr. Rosen handles it. It doesn't ever go too far, but it goes right to that brink. And that's never going to not make me want to back up. And I think that's probably good. I think that's probably my health, not to be like, oh, let me get in there, let me throw a punch.
Can you talk a little bit about times that you've had group members that you haven't particularly liked? Because I imagine that's happened.
Can
as well.
I? How long do we have? Yeah. It depends on any given day. Someone could just be like, trigger me. But there are people who sit in the circle who reliably, like every session, just the way their faces, it just reminds me of like my mother's most disapproving, most like just like eyeing me up and down. And what's interesting in the relationships where I have the most like dislike, like I think I just don't like you, and they don't like me either. Like, it's mutual. That's sort of the beautiful thing. Like, I haven't had this situation where I'm really pining over someone and they seem to like, I make their skin crawl. It seems like there's a jealousy. Like, I have a lot of sister issues. That's my second book. But I have a lot of like, I had a golden little sister. So when I sit in a therapy group and Dr. Rosen is giving another woman a lot of attention, I don't like it. I don't like it a lot, like a whole lot. And I know I'm not supposed to act. I know I'm supposed to tolerate these things. Like, everyone deserves help and attention, but like, if she's thinner than I am and she's younger and she's got great hair, watch out. Watch out. And there's a woman who, my perception is, she's smarter than I am, in my mind. Like, I'm comparing, which is already fraught, right? She's smarter than I am, better hair, she's got a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. So and she feels that way about me. I remind her of her golden sister, who kind of like played the damsel in distress and like weaponized incompetence. And I'm like, I don't do that. I kind of do. So I think that's kind of magical that we like hate each other. You know what I mean? Like, that's the work. Like, it's kind of bone on bone. And it's so painful. It's so painful. I can see it coming from a mile away. She'll make a face or she'll make a comment about something I'm saying, and she sounds just like the mother that lives in my head. So it's not my real mom, but it's the mom from when I was in 4th grade. I was kind of fat and things weren't going well for me. And then we're off to the races, because then I'll say something and she's like, I sound like her mom, right? So that is so unpleasant, and it's also incredibly healing to stick with it long enough to get up under. She's not really my mom. I'm not really her sister or whatever. And it's helped me. How does that help me? So sometimes I'm with my husband and he'll seem dismissive in a way that I'm like, just like, to 0 to 180, right? And I'll be like, don't you dismiss me, like, and I can see I'm reacting. It reminds me of being in group, which I already know from peeling back those layers. That's who I experienced my mother as being, like, when she didn't have a lot of bandwidth, like, my dad's off at an AA meeting, she's got 2 young kids, she's by herself, she's got no money. Yeah, she was a little dismissive of me. And so getting up under that helps me not blow up relationships. And I learned that in group, and I learned it over and over again.
So you've described yourself as a group lifer.
Yes.
What do you think differentiates the people who go to group who are going to become group lifers? Because you talk about people like Max, who sticks around.
Yeah, he's been around since 1980.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine there are other people who are pretty transient in the process.
Yeah. I think if I hadn't seen results pretty quickly, I think I came in just the right amount of pain that there were results very quickly, right? Like I came in so not even upset. I was so about to burst because of my food secrets, right? And it was so weird. I could never, ever have told anyone, well, at night, I eat 12 apples every single night. And it's kind of a problem because it's hard to get that many apples, and I spend a ton of money on fruit, and it's also really weird, and I don't feel that good. I could have never done that, and I was about to burst. So when I come into group, and it took 6 sessions for Dr. Rosen to hone in on my food, like that's pretty good. And it was the most uncomfortable. I mean, the things that help me the most are the most uncomfortable. And I think I probably knew that from 12-step world, so I had some understanding, and I might be a tiny bit masochistic. And when he said, tell the group what you ate yesterday, and I was like, I would have rather do anything. I'll take off my clothes, I'll sacrifice a lamb, I will do anything. And I knew that coming up against my biggest resistance in my whole life, I also knew the only way to get better is to just deal with this, to do this. And the fact that he busted me like that, like asking that question when we'd been talking literally about Rory's ferret. And then now I'm like saying, well, and then I had I had a totally normal eating day, and then at 8 o'clock, and I was like, I didn't have to tell him. I could have just said, and then I had some chicken sausage and some spinach. And then something inside of me was like, just tell. I think I had 8 apples, maybe 12, I don't know. So those moments are the ones that I look back at, and I felt myself I literally felt myself getting well. I hated it, and I knew I was getting well. And I think if people aren't ready, if you're not ready to say you're eating 12 apples, it's probably not time, or it's not the right modality. Or some people need to be safer. Like, it's not that safe in group therapy. Like, they're coming for you. They are coming for you. And it's so painful. And there's a brutalness to it, right? Like, there's a gloves off quality to it. And I think to myself sometimes, like, the people who I've seen leave, I think they just need some, like, quieter and softer and a one-on-one. And when I tried the one-on-one, softer, quieter, I was so bored, and I was performing, like, let me tap dance for you. And in group, there's just no tap, like, I can't tap dance for all 8 people. Like, I just had to surrender. I just had to like free fall in there. And that's how it worked for me. But I could see why, if you're just not ready for all those eyes on you, like, the exposure is extraordinary. And if you're not ready for that, you gotta go. You just gotta go.
You mentioned it in our conversation. You talked about David and your experience in Hawaii and whatnot. How much does that come into your thoughts and play in your life these days after your experience?
I think before I went to group, I carried around this, like, grief, unspeakable grief about Hawaii. It was so confusing. It wasn't my dad, and my friend's dad drowned, and it was so horrifying to think about, and I would have intrusive thoughts about it. And now I feel like it comes up in a way that seems somewhat organic, like my kids were, they want to go on a beach vacation. Oh, they've never been to the beach. I wonder why. And I think to myself, like, I'm scared, I need to have help. So it's like the narrative isn't hysterical, like my body doesn't have this clenched, like, I can't get help reaction, like helpless. Like, I'm like, okay, I have like adult thoughts about it. That seems to be it, and it really only comes up around, like, I get it around travel, and like I notice, and I'll probably always have this, like, if there's a big trip, I'm always like, who's not coming home? And I just have to say it out loud, and I mean it. Like, I mean it, because my first big trip I ever went on, someone didn't come home. And so it doesn't stop me from traveling. I'm not great fun around the water, but I can accept that, and I don't think it's driving me in that subconscious way when I felt like I could never talk about it. that's where I get into trouble if I think I can't ever talk about something. I'm not supposed, I think the language I used before group was like, I'm not supposed to talk about this. It's a bummer, and also it didn't happen to me, so I'm just kind of like trying to bogart someone else's trauma and like make it my own. I didn't know what part belonged to me, and now I understand that better, and I accept that there's parts of tragedy and trauma that I'll never understand. I will never understand it, and I hope I can at least use it to connect with other people, because I'm not the only person who's had a terrible thing happen.
I think I see questions coming in. Okay. Why did you write the book to help others?
Why did I write the book?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the book, it wasn't to help others. I would love, I sort of feel like that's such a good story, but it's not the truth. The truth is, I had tried to write a novel, and it was terrible. It was very unreadable, and it was about this woman, and she was a lawyer, and she was unhappy, and she liked her therapist, and it wasn't good. And I didn't know how to fix it, and Dr. Rosen was like, bring it in, bring your final scene into group. Well, that was a thing, because I took it, I didn't know how to end the book, because I didn't know how to write. I hadn't taken any classes, I hadn't done anything yet. So the end of the book, I didn't know how to end it, so I just had the girl, the protagonist, who was a lot like me. I was like, well, they just had sex. And that's not right as a narrative, and it's not right in any universe that I was writing in. And so he had me bring it in, and he was like, ask someone to read it. So I gave it to Brad, and Brad is reading horribly written sex scene that like everyone thinks is me and Dr. Rosen, because kind of was written that way. And screaming, stop, it's terrible. And Max turned to me and he said, Christie, you clearly want to write about your experiences in therapy. Why don't you just tell the truth? Because your fiction is, and I was like, well, okay. So then I thought, then I just took some time and I could see the arc. I was like, oh, this is kind of like Cheryl Strayed goes and, she walks the Appalachian Trail. Well, I just walked from my apartment to therapy. I mean, it's similar. I could see, and I changed. And so I could see the story. But I didn't think it was ever going to go out into the world. I thought I was going to learn how to write, and then I would go back to the therapy novel and fix it. But I got stuck here in memoir land, so. But it's a slightly better story to be like, I just wanted to help people. But I did not. I was trying to entertain my group.
Christie, thank you so much for your book. My question is, after everything that you've been through, what does health mean for you?
Being connected to other people and letting it just be real messy. Letting me be really messy, letting other people. I still feel like emotions are kind of scary and messy, even though I know I've had all this training. Emotions are great, let them out, they're beautiful. I still find them very messy, and so being connected is the number one thing, and having all my emotions and tolerating the people I'm connected to having their emotions. I have to keep it pretty simple.
Do you ever get bad advice in group?
Yes! Wow, that is such a good question. Here's the worst advice. I mean, I don't know about the worst, but one time, this was early on, this is when I was at my law firm, which shall remain unnamed, and I came to group and I was like, well, I have a crush on this guy at the law firm, and he has a crush on me. I was kind of scared of him because I could see there was a lot of addiction in his life. And I was like, oh, it's me again, falling for another addict. But he was so nice, and I thought he was just, we had so much fun together. And Dr. Rosen's excited. I seem to be coming to life. I'm interested in someone. He's employed. And he said to me, go to the, and I had just gotten put on this big case. He said, go to the assigning partner and ask him to put your crush on your case. Terrible. I was like, even I, who I want gold stars, I want to get A's, I want to be the valedictorian of therapy, I was like, I am not doing that. It wasn't even like a thought experiment. He was like, go do this. And I didn't do it, which to this day, I'm so proud. I did not do that. Is so unprofessional. I was like, I remember saying to him, like, just because you're some rogue therapist who doesn't have a boss, doesn't mean I'm going to go act like a jackass. Like, the most unfeminist thing I've, like, put my crush on this Kate. No, didn't do it.
Does your book make you more authentic?
I think there's a potential for that to be true. I also think that there's ways to hide behind the stories. They're all slick. They're like slick, smooth stones. It's like, ha ha, I dated this bad boy and he didn't shower. Like, there's a way to be a caricature of myself around these stories, and that's not what I want. So it's a good question, because people are always like, oh, you're so authentic, you're so brave. And I take that as an affirmation. I hope that that's true. But I also know there's also a way to, I can always find a way to hide, like, yeah, it's also crazy. Dr. Rosen's so crazy. When really it's a super meaningful part of my life. It's still part of my life. And it means so much to me. And I want to share it with the world. So I think the book can make me more authentic, and I think there's also ways in which I can use it to be a caricature and a character, which is moving farther away from authenticity. These are awesome questions.
Are we going to see this book made into a movie starring Reese Witherspoon?
That's a great question, too. Is it going to be made into a movie starring Reese Witherspoon? I love the vision. Reese Witherspoon's company has optioned it. They optioned it, and then once something is in the Hollywood machine, the writer of the book is like the least important person ever, which is probably good, because I have an ego problem. But when I first got on the call, I got on a Zoom call with her producing partner, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm brimming with ideas, casting ideas, and the first thing out of her mouth, like, after hello, was like, so we think it's really important for the writer to step aside. I was like, well, do you want to hear my casting ideas? And she humored me. She was very sweet. I was like, what about Idris Elba for Dr. Rosen? And she was like, we'll take it from here. But I will say, so they have the option, and they've renewed it. I don't know what's happened. Every now and then I'll get like a communication that's like official looking, and it's basically just saying, we're still working on it. Don't call us, we'll call you. But what I will say about Hello Sunshine, which is Reese Witherspoon's company, I was very impressed when I was dealing with the book people. The diversity on publishing has a very well-earned reputation for being very, very white and lots of women. And when I was working with the Hello Sunshine team, I didn't work with any white women. And it was really startling and really cool. And then when I talked to this producer, and I'm like telling her like who should play me, and I mean, Jennifer Lawrence, is she available? And then she said, you know what she said? She said, do you know Beanie Feldstein? Feldstein. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, that's different than Jennifer Lawrence, but okay. And then I totally fell in love with the idea, of course. But one of the things she said when I was like, Idris Elba, and she said, she said it so kindly. She was like, Dr. Rosen is the same throughout your book. Like, he's always his wacky self throughout. He doesn't have a character arc. So it wouldn't be good for the world to put a man of color in that position. And she said to me, do you know the trope of the magical Negro? And I was like, I do. And she was sort of like saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to participate in like the worst of Hollywood, and so you can't have Idris Elba, is essentially what she's saying. So then I was like, what about Kerry Washington for me? And then she was like, really? We'll take it from here. So that's a great question. I love thinking about it. Like, I try not to like imagine it too much, because I imagine it's going to be one of those things where like it's going to sound so cool, but it's going to be really complicated. If it happens, it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be really complicated and scary, and not at all what I'm picturing here tonight. So,
did Dr. Rosen prescribe medication to his patients, or was it just therapy?
As I say in the book, he's not really a pill guy. It seems like, what I understand is like, he feels like a lot of the people he treats are addicts, and my eating disorder qualifies as addiction. We're all kids of addicts and whatever. And what we need is connection, not a pill. That being said, I did get medication from him when I had my babies and I had postpartum. So it's not a tool that he uses indiscriminately. Like, you can't go get a pill from him. But when the time is right, and I have gotten medication from him. So yes, it's just not, it's also the least interesting thing. Like, that's not an interesting scene, writing the prescription, but like, go get a tattoo that says I love my breasts. A little bit better for the narrative.
What was the moment when you shifted from an aspiring writer into a bona fide one?
I feel a little bit like when I have feelings of self-doubt, which come up a lot, I still feel like that aspiring writer. Like, I aspire to write again. I aspire to write something that's as meaningful and has as far of a reach as Group. And I don't know if that will ever happen. But in terms of a bona fide writer, I always think about, when I was at my first law firm, I was probably 2 years in, and it was this beautiful summer night, and the sun was going down, and I was going to be there a couple more hours, and I was carrying a box of documents, and I was like, am I a lawyer? I was 2 years in, I'd passed the bar, I was a lawyer, and I was the second year. There were people below me, and I was like, am I a lawyer? Like, there's something about me, there's a lag time between my self-concept and like what's actually happening in the world, like in my life. So I definitely know I'm a writer, but I can't put a pin on like when I became a bona fide writer. I mean, even after I wrote Group, I was like, am I a writer? They're like, actually, you're an author. That's a special kind of writer. And I'm like, there's something about it that feels hard to attach to. I don't know what that's about exactly.
Do you guys practice law?
What I miss, this is going to sound insane, I miss getting work emails. I miss feeling like that ding of like, you're alive, someone's looking for me, like being held electronically, which most people are like, oh my God, you want more email? No, yes, I'm saying yes. And I really miss the way, at my last organization, which was government, we were on teams. It was very, very functional, and we had a mission, and we all were marching to the same mission. And when we got a bad ruling, all of us felt it. When we had a victory, we all felt it. I miss that team part. Like, as a writer, it's my name on the book. If the book does well, it's mine. If it doesn't, that's mine. So I miss the team, and I miss the common enterprise. And I have an agent and an editor and a publicist, and those people are wonderful, but they have a lot of Christies, and they have a lot of writers, and I'm only one. And if I don't have a book coming out, then it's like, it's just cold. My email is just all Zara and political things, you know? So that part, I miss the groupness of a law firm or legal practice.
Well, I know that all of us have just so enjoyed your engaging conversation, and we could probably wish it to go for hours and hours, but we are at the end of our presentation today. And so, first and foremost, can we please thank Dr. Stephen Miller and author Christie Tate. This has just been such a wonderful book selection, especially for a community program like ours between our two communities. A book about connection and community, especially several years after all of us had a shared, admittedly traumatic experience going through a pandemic. What more impactful than coming together today across our two communities for connection, to hear and learn and be human together. So thank you so much for being here.
But I want to first thank again the History Center and all of you for coming today. Thank you so very much. I know you have so many events to go to locally, but this was very special. And a special thank you to the friends of the Lake Forest Lake Forest Library, and to the Lake Bluff Library, and all our staff and all the folks that helped put this together. So again, we are very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much.